It was messy and it was protracted, but I think House Republicans got to a good place in elevating Louisiana Republican Mike Johnson to the speakership yesterday.
Yeah, it took 23 days, 14 candidates and 4 votes, but we have a new speaker finally.
And one of the strengths of Mike Johnson is he is going to be a good spokesman for the party on the full range of political and cultural issues facing America. And this is not guesswork because you've seen it during his time on the Armed Services Committee, during his time on the House Judiciary Committee as well, committee chaired by Jim Jordan now. I mean, just a couple of snippets to highlight what I'm talking about. Here is Mike Johnson interrogating Attorney General Merrick Garland last year over an apparent conflict of interest the Attorney General had. Now, this has dissipated into the ether, but nonetheless, it was a proper moment. Again, Mike Johnson, constitutional lawyer. He previously worked at Alliance for Defending Freedom. Those are good credentials. And this interrogation of Garland was over the fact that while the Department of Justice is pushing CRT, pushing the left's identitarian curriculum in K through 12 education, he has a son-in-law who's selling said curriculum to K through 12 school systems around the country. And this is the kind of pointed yet room temperature defenestration that Mike Johnson can do as a trained constitutional attorney. Take a listen.
Wait just a minute. The question is, the thing that has concerned many of those parents that are showing up at these school board meetings, the very basis of their objection and their vigorous debate, as you mentioned earlier, is the curricula, the very curricula that your son-in-law is selling. So to millions of Americans, I mean, my constituents, I was home all weekend, I got an earful about this. They're very concerned about that. Subpart E of that federal regulation says an employee of the executive branch is discouraged from engaging in conduct that's likely to affect the financial interest of someone close to them. Your son-in-law, your daughter, clearly meets that definition. And so the question is, did you follow that regulation? Did you have the appropriate agency ethic official look into this? Did you seek guidance as the federal regulation requires?
This memorandum is aimed at violence and threats of violence.
I understand that, but did you seek ethics counsel before you issued a letter that directly relates to the financial interest of your family? Yes or no?
This memorandum does not relate to the financial interests of anyone. It's against.
I take that as a no.
Memorandum is against violence and threats of violence.
Will you, Mr. Attorney General, will you commit to having the appropriate ethics designee review the case and make the results public?
This memorandum is aimed at violence and threats of violence.
I understand your talking point. You're not answering my question, Mr. Attorney General. With all due respect, will you submit to an ethics review of this matter, yes or no?
There's no company in America or hopefully no law-abiding citizen in America who believes that threats of violence should not be prevented. There are no conflicts of interest that anyone could have.
Mike Johnson also had a good moment over the summer, a good moment that not too many Republicans have, putting a pro-abortion activist on defense. A lot of Republican candidates up and down the ballot around the country could take a page.
So abortion should be allowed then, by your definition, for any reason, for any purpose, at any stage, right?
I trust people to make decisions about their body, and then when relevant, I think that they need to consult their medical practitioners.
Okay.
And not
if
Congress.
It is, listen, let me just ask you this question. If it is not lawful and morally acceptable to take the life of a 10-year-old child, I assume you agree with that, right? That would be wrong, correct?
I believe that.
Okay.
That is
And
wrong.
a 2-year-old child, same thing. That would be murder. We would all agree that's wrong. Then what is the principal distinction between the human being that is 2 years old or 9 months old or 1 week old or an hour old than one that is 8 inches further up the birth canal in the utero? What's the difference? Why is it okay in the latter case and not the former cases?
I trust people to determine what to do with their own bodies.
Wow.
Full stop.
What you heard there is somebody being put on defense for having a position that is essentially pro-infanticide. And that's the kind of deconstruction of the new Marxists that is required at this time. Let me give you another example. Tackling Ali Mayorkas, the DHS secretary. And we'll talk about Ali Mayorkas with Brian Stile momentarily. About the disinformation board that DHS tried to stand up, but then relented, at least as far as we know, under the kind of scrutiny that Mike Johnson provided.
Who determines what is false?
Congressman, our focus.
No, who determines what is false in your agency? If you're going to pull something off the internet and collude with a social media platform to make sure Americans don't see it, who determines what's false?
Congressman, we don't do that.
That's not true. That is not true. That is not what the court has found. This is not a Republican talking point. This is what the documents show. We've had people testify under oath that say, and you just defined the term, you're telling me that you don't know who determines what is false?
Congressman, what we do at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is identify the tactics that adverse nation states use to weaponize disinformation.
Okay, what is disinformation? What is disinformation?
Disinformation is inaccurate information.
Who determines what's inaccurate? Who determines what's false? Do you understand the problem here? The reason the framers of our Constitution did not create an exception for quote-unquote false information from the First Amendment is because they didn't trust the government to determine what it is. And you have whole committees of people in your agency trying to determine what they define as false or misinformation.
That is not true.
Well, then what is true? Please enlighten us.
What we do is we disclose the tactics that adverse nation states are utilizing to weaponize disinformation.
No, sir. The court found specifically, it's a finding of fact that is not disputed by the government defendants, the Biden administration, your agency, the FBI, or DHS, not in the litigation. They determined you and all of your cohorts made no distinction between domestic speech and foreign speech. So don't stand there and tell me under oath that you only focused on adversaries around the world, foreign actors. That's not true.
Congressman, the Missouri case, the litigation to which you refer, is the subject of continuing litigation.
But the facts were not disputed, and I so
wish he had more time. Me too, because Mike Johnson is sharp. For more on Speaker Johnson, day one, or day two, I guess, we're pleased to be joined by Brian Stile, who's a Republican congressman from just north of the Cheddar Curtain, Wisconsin's first, the Kenosha area. Brian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
So the factions in the caucus, everybody united behind Mike Johnson. Are they going to stay united as we move into the policy phase of this experience?
Mike Johnson's a strong, principled conservative, and I think we've learned our lesson over the last 3 weeks that we're stronger when united at being able to push back against the worst policies of the Biden administration. And the top three are the foreign policy that's been a disaster where we need to stand with Israel, the reckless spending that's been driving inflation, and the unsecured border. And if we are united, we can push back against this administration. The last 3 weeks when we weren't united, we really just gave the Biden administration the ability to run roughshod over the United States from a policy perspective.
And Ali Mayorkas specifically, I just interviewed Tom Homan, the former acting ICE director under Trump, yesterday for my Counterculture podcast, and he's a bit perplexed why there hasn't been a move by House Republicans to impeach Mayorkas yet for his various instances of dereliction of duty, starting with the southern border, which Speaker Johnson mentioned in his remarks yesterday. What about the appetite to go after someone like Mayorkas for House Republicans?
I think we need to be holding him accountable and others in the Biden administration accountable for their lack of action for upholding their constitutional responsibilities. I would love to see under Speaker Johnson us move forward through our committee structure to begin a review of whether or not those actions justify impeachment. And as you look at the southern border and you see the disasters put forward by the Biden administration, you see the refusal to enforce U.S. law at the southern border, I think we're beginning to build that case. The fact that this Congress has not moved faster in that regard is a frustration I and many of my colleagues share. And I think under Speaker Johnson, we have an opportunity to look as to why some of this was not moving faster, because the American people deserve to know the answer as to what's taking place, not only with Mayorkas and the southern border, but also with the Biden family and the transactions that have occurred there as to whether or not the president has engaged in any official action due to his exposure to foreign agents. We need a full-fledged review of many people, and I'm hopeful under this new speakership we're going to be able to do that.
Are you getting any? Oh, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
Congressman. Are you getting any migrants or illegals shipped to your district there in Wisconsin?
Not in the formal buses that are on TV, but I'll tell you, all across the country, in almost every communities that don't have television stations that run 24/7 are equally impacted by the unsecured U.S.-Mexico border. We have challenges all across small cities in Wisconsin and medium-sized cities where we are seeing the direct results of fentanyl, of human trafficking, of horrific crimes. And I think this is a call across the nation. When you see big blue city mayors calling for it, you know it's also true in small conservative towns across the country. This is a moment where we have to take action on the U.S.-Mexico border.
So it was on spending, the issue of spending, your job as appropriators, upon which Kevin McCarthy was felled. What is realistic to expect from House Republicans and from Speaker Johnson when it comes to the appropriations part of your job, forthcoming bills to continue to fund the government? What's realistic in terms of trying to curtail runaway spending in D.C.?
Speaker Johnson put forward an aggressive timeline for us to address our discretionary spending. We're going to be back in action on the House floor later today to move through these 13 key appropriations bills. But I think also importantly, as he said in his speech upon taking the speakership, is that he wants to have a full debt commission to look at all federal spending. Because as we think about this, we spend a lot of time and energy on the discretionary spending. Think of Department of Transportation or Department of Labor. That is absolutely important to do. But all of those only make up about 12.5% of federal spending. Defense is another 12.5%. 75% of all of our federal spending is on autopilot. And having a debt commission to actually look at that 75%, I think is absolutely imperative. And I think that was a good call when he first took the speaker's gavel, that he is going to move forward on that. And as you saw on TV, maybe, all Republicans stood up, and there's even a few Democrats that are starting to realize that if we want to control our spending, we have to have a look at all of these key programs.
All right. Well, if you're ever running late for a vote, please learn the lesson of Jamal Bowman and don't confuse a fire alarm for an electric door opener. You know, he's very confused, but at least charges have been now filed against him.
Well, as you know, I serve as the chairman of the committee at House Administration, so I've reviewed these videotapes. And it is obvious that this individual went and illegally pulled the fire alarm. He was properly charged, unfortunately only at the municipal level, not at the federal level. He's going to be probably pleading guilty to that, paying a fine, and then I've called on the House Ethics Committee to review that. When you engage in a legal maneuver such as pulling a fire alarm, to delay a House proceeding, there needs to be serious ramifications for that. This is the kind of childish games that we see people play that make people so frustrated in D.C., and we see people get away with this. I think it was a positive move that he was charged, at least at the municipal level, for pulling a fire alarm under false pretenses.
But, I mean, after he pulled the alarm, he didn't push the door right away to go out, and he said that he was in a hurry.
Because he's
and
lying.
Then he walked past police. He walked past firefighters and didn't even say a word to them.
Well, I'll paint you the picture.
Yeah, please.
Because I've reviewed the videotapes. In 4 seconds, he comes into the camera view. He walks up to the doors. He knocks over the sign that says the door is closed. He pushes the door briefly, which does not sound the alarm because you need to hold it for 3 seconds. He then turns to his left. He pulls the fire alarm. He never looks back at the door. He then departs the scene. It's a minute later, he walks out the door and passes 3 officers, says nothing, continues on, passes additional officers, and it's dozens of minutes later before he goes and votes on the House floor. And so his excuse as to why he did this carries absolutely no water. And it's the reason that it was the reason that he was charged, and it's the reason he's going to have to plead guilty to these charges, because he clearly did this in a manner that is an attempt to delay an official House proceeding. He wasn't charged under that, but we know that's the case.
Well, maybe Speaker Johnson will have a training session for Democrats on how to open doors at the Capitol, in the interest of bipartisanship. Brian Stile, he is the Republican congressman from the 1st District in Wisconsin. That's the Kenosha area. Brian, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Donald Trump Jr. is coming to Chicagoland on Friday, October 27th. McHenry County GoPack is hosting this exclusive event in Addison. But space is extremely limited, and RSVPs will be accommodated on a first-come, first-served basis. To secure your tickets, go to countyconservatives.com. Meet President Trump's most trusted surrogate, his old